Okay, so Annabelle, this is the second. I missed reading the first 2 pages to you, but I'll go back. But this is part 2 video right now. I'm reading chapter 1 of The Breadwinner. Her father finished reading the man's letter a second time. The customer thanked him and paid. I will look for you when it is time to write a reply. Most people in Afghanistan could not read or write. Parvana was one of the lucky ones. Both of her parents had been to university, and they believed in education for everyone, even the girls. Customers came and went as the afternoon wore on. Most spoke Dari, D-A-R-I, the same language Parvana spoke best. When a customer spoke Pashto, she could recognize most of it, but not all. Her parents could speak English too. Her father had gone to university in England, and that was a long time ago. The market was a very busy place. Men shopped for their families, and peddlers hawked their goods and services. Some, like the tea shop, had their own stalls. With such a big urn and so many trays of cups, it had to stay in one place. Tea boys ran back and forth into the labyrinth of the marketplace, carrying tea to customers who couldn't leave their own shops, then running back again with the empty cups. I could do that, Parvana whispered. She'd like to be able to run around in the market, to know its winding streets as well as she knew the 4 walls of her home. Her father turned to look at her. I'd rather see you running around a schoolyard. He turned around again to call out to the passing men, anything written, anything read, Pashto and Dari, wonderful items for sale. Parvana frowned. It wasn't her fault she wasn't in school. She would rather be there too instead of sitting on this uncomfortable blanket, her back and bottom getting sore. She missed her friends, her blue and white school uniform, and doing new things each day. History was her favorite subject, especially Afghan history. Everybody had to come to Afghanistan. The Persians came 4,000 years ago. Alexander the Great came too, followed by the Greeks and Arabs and Turks, British, and finally the Soviets. One of the conquerors, Tamerlane from Samarkand, cut off the heads of his enemies and stacked them in huge piles like melons at a fruit stand. All these people had come to Parvana's beautiful country to try to take it over, and the Afghans had kicked them all out again. But now the country was ruled by the Taliban militia. They were Afghans, and they had very definite ideas about how things should be run. When they first took over the capital city of Kabul and forbade girls to go to school, Parvana wasn't terribly unhappy. She had a test coming up in arithmetic that she hadn't prepared for, and she was in trouble for talking in class again. The teacher was going to send a note home to her mother, but the Taliban took over first. What are you crying for? She had asked Noria, who couldn't stop sobbing. I think a holiday is very nice. Parvana was sure the Taliban would let them go back to school in a few days. By then, her teacher would have forgotten all about sending a tattletale note to her mother. You're just stupid, Noria screamed at her. Leave me alone. That was her high school sister. One of the difficulties of living with your whole family in one room was that it was impossible to really leave anyone alone. Wherever Noria went, there was Parvana. And wherever Parvana went, there was Noria. Both of Parvana's parents had come from old, respected Afghan families. With their education, they had earned high salaries. They had had a big house with a courtyard, a couple of servants, television set, a refrigerator, a car. Noria had had her own room. Parvana had shared a room with her little sister, Miriam. Miriam chattered a lot, but she thought Parvana was wonderful. It had certainly been wonderful to get away from Noria sometimes. That house had been destroyed by a bomb. The family had moved several times since then, and each time they moved to a smaller place. Every time their house was bombed, they lost more of their things, and with each bomb, they got poorer. Now they lived together in one small room. There had been a war going on in Afghanistan for more than 20 years, twice as long as Parvana had been alive. At first, it was the Soviets who rolled their big tanks into the country and flew warplanes that dropped bombs on villages in the countryside. Parvana was born 1 month before the Soviets started going back to their own country. You were such an ugly baby, the Soviets couldn't stand to be in the same country with you, Noria was fond of telling her. They fled back across the border in horror as fast as their tanks could carry them. After the Soviets left, the people who had been shooting at the Soviets decided they wanted to keep shooting at something, so they shot at each other. Many bombs fell on Kabul during that time, and many people died. Bombs had been part of Parvana's whole life. Every day, every night, rockets would fall out of the sky and someone's house would explode. When the bombs fell, people ran. First they ran one way, then they ran another, trying to find a place where the bombs wouldn't find them. When she was younger, Parvana was carried. When she got bigger, she had to do her own running. Now most of the country was controlled by the Taliban. The word Taliban meant religious scholars, but Parvana's father told her that religion was about teaching people how to be better human beings, how to be kinder. The Taliban are not making Afghanistan a kinder place to live, he said. Although bombs still fell on Kabul, they didn't fall as often as they used to. There was still a war going on in the north of the country, and that was where most of the killing took place these days. After a few more customers had come and gone, father suggested they end their work for the day. Parvana jumped to her feet and then collapsed back down again. Her foot was asleep. She rubbed it, then tried again, and this time she was able to stand. First, she gathered up all the little items they were trying to sell, dishes, pillowcases, household ornaments that had survived the bombings. Like many Afghans, they sold what they could. Mother and Noria regularly went through what was left of the family's belongings to see what they could spare. There were so many people selling things in Kabul, Parvana marveled that there was anyone left to buy them. Father packed his pens and writing paper in his shoulder bag. Leaning on his walking stick and taking Parvana's arm, he slowly stood up. Parvana shook the dust out of the blanket, folded it up, and they went on their way. For short distances, Father could manage with just his walking stick. For longer journeys, he needed Parvana to lean on. You're just the right height, he said. What will happen when I grow? She asked. Then I will grow with you. Father used to have a false leg, but he sold it. He hadn't planned to. False legs had to be specially made, and one person's false leg didn't necessarily fit another. But when a customer saw Father's leg on the blanket, he ignored the other things for sale and demanded to buy the leg. He offered such a good price, Father eventually relented. There was a lot of false legs for sale in the market now. Since the Taliban decreed that women must stay inside, many husbands took their wives' false legs away. You're not going anywhere, so why do you need a leg? They asked. There were bombed-out buildings all over Kabul. Neighborhoods had turned from homes and businesses into bricks and dust. Kabul had once been beautiful. Noria remembered whole sidewalks, traffic lights that changed color, evening trips to restaurants and cinemas, and browsing in fine shops for clothes and books. For most of Parvana's life, the city had been in ruins, and it was hard for her to imagine it another way. It hurt her to hear stories of old Kabul before the bombing. She didn't want to think about everything the bombs had taken away, including her father's health and her beautiful home. It made her angry, and since she could do nothing with her anger, it made her sad. They left the busy part of the market and turned down a side street to their building. Parvana carefully guided her father around the potholes and broken places in the road. How do women in burqas manage to walk along these streets? Parvana asked her father. How do they see where they're going? They fall down a lot, her father replied. He was right. Parvana had seen them fall. She looked at her favorite mountain. It rose up majestically at the end of the street. What's the name of that mountain? She had asked her father soon after they moved to their new neighborhood. That's Mount Parvana. It is not, Noria said scornfully. You shouldn't lie to the child, Mother had said. The whole family had been walking together in the time before the Taliban. Mother and Noria just wore light scarves around their hair. Their faces soaked up the Kabul sunshine. Mountains are named for people, Father said. I'm a person, and I named that mountain Mount Parvana. Her mother gave in, laughing. Father laughed too, and Parvana and baby Mariam, who didn't even know why she was laughing. Even grumpy Noria joined in. The sound of the family's laughter scampered up Mount Parvana and back down into the street. Now Parvana and her family slowly made their way up the steps of their building. They lived on the third floor of an apartment building. It had been hit in a rocket attack, and half of it was rubble. The stairs were on the outside of the building, zigzagging back and forth on their way up. They hadn't been damaged by the bomb and didn't quite meet in places. Only some parts of the staircase had a railing. Never rely on the railing, Father told Parvana over and over. Going up was easier for Father than going down, but it still took a long time. Finally, they reached the door of their home and went inside. Okay, so what were some of the words you guys didn't know? We have a glossary here too. I didn't give you a copy of the glossary.
Talib.
What word?
Talib.
Talib.
Talib. With a T.
Oh, Talib. What did we say Talib meant?
Taliban?
I think it's a Taliban person.
That's what I guess.
Okay, and then another word that was on there that you guys may have heard in the beginning was what is it called, Anna?
Chador?
Yeah, chador or chador. And what does that mean? Because you guys had that in your glossary. Kari, can you read it?
A piece of cloth worn by women and girls to cover their hair and shoulders.
Okay, so it's kind of just covering your hair and shoulders. Now, okay, what are the your first impressions of Parvana and her family? Poor?
She said that she could never really get away from them.
Yeah, stuck together.
Yeah. So like if you were mad at each other,
Yeah.
stuck together. And she grew up with like bombs and stuff. Like that just seemed like a regular thing.
Yeah.
With them.
Really hard war-like start of her life.
Yeah.
What is your impression of daily life in Afghanistan when this story takes place? Hard? Kari? Hard?
I don't know.
The bomb dropped on the one family's house, she said, and they like kept moving, but they got more poor because more things broke.
Yeah.
They lost more money, so.
I mean, we can kind of have a slight understanding of this after COVID a little bit. We would never have even understood this before, being trapped inside or somewhere and not nowhere to go. It's very interesting. Okay, so now we've considered our first impressions of the text. Why do you think Deborah Ellis chose to include so much history of both the country and of Parvana's family in the first chapter?
To make it seem more deep and
So we can understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wasn't that something like at the end you were reading?
Well, that was the first thing I read, but I was just talking about the first chapter here. So yeah, I think it made it deeper. It made you have more of an understanding. I think you needed, the word is context. You need context to know where the story is set and how. So that chapter is providing you the context. She opens the novel in the marketplace. Why do you think she would pick the marketplace to open it?
Because they spend so much time there. It's kind of a big, it's kind of an important place for them.
Important place for the family. Okay, so here's your homework. Okay, write this down because this is not on your sheet. You can do this too, Micah. I want you to list 10 items that if you were Parvana would be in your satchel or box that you would not want to sell. So it can't be people. It has to be something carryable. Okay, it can't be a car. It has to be something carryable.
10 items.
10 items.
Right now?
No, you can, I want you to bring those to me on Monday. So add that to your
I gotta get my
what's due on Monday thing. What are you doing?
I gotta get my t-shirt like this.
Okay. So everybody write that down, and Annabelle, mark that too. I just want you to give me a list of 10 items. If you want to give it to me today when we're done with class, you can. You can do that. Let me see what else I want to talk about here. Okay. Okay, so yeah, that's what I want you to do with Breadwinner for Monday. And that's all you have, for Monday, that's all you have to do. I am going to email you my reading of chapter 2. See on your notes here, I say you're gonna read 7 through 8. You're not gonna do that. So all I want you to do on Friday is listen to chapter 2. So you need to make a note on your thing here on Friday, because I have 7 to 8 and we changed that up. So you just have to listen to chapter 2 on Friday. And Micah, you'll get that from me too. Okay. Anything else I wanted to do for language arts? I wanted to talk about that because if there's anything else for language arts I wanted to do that with Annabelle before I got off the video. I don't think there's anything else. Is there, guys? Okay. So I'm going to stop this.